All right, so if you're coming into the session, we're getting ready to get started in just about 30 seconds. So if you hear me, then everything is, then you're connected correctly. Good, 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 good. All right, let's go ahead and get going this morning. So welcome. It's good to have you here at our monthly webinar. Today, we're going to be talking about project prioritization. Why are we doing this project? And so as we kick off this morning, let me mention something to you just as a way of updating. We've just posted a new video. You maybe have seen it on changes to PMI and changes to the PMP certification. And so that video was just created this week, and we just uploaded it to our Facebook account and YouTube, as well as LinkedIn. And so let me just kind of give you a heads up. As you look at this slide, you'll notice that the badges are across the top. Over to the left, the first badge is an authorized training partner. And so this is the new program that everyone is going to with project management. And if you're going to be a provider to provide PDUs, you have to jump through that hoop. It's called an ATP program. They no longer have the REP program. That changed as of December 31st. And then if you're going to teach PMP boot camps, the second badge is the ATP instructor badge. So no longer can somebody just teach PMP boot camps. They have to go to 2 days of training. And so those two badges are things that you're going to see, or you already are seeing those. And so you'll see those this year. All right. Good morning, everybody. It's good. So good to have everybody here. I see a good group representing several companies here. And so let's go ahead and get started this morning as we talk about project prioritization. Why are we doing this project? So let's start off with one of the first pieces I think that's kind of important to us to understand, and that's going to be a little bit of a flow chart for you. So let's get this up here where you can see this. So project prioritization process. So over on the left-hand side, you're going to see several things are influencing projects. And many times we don't think about it because we're down in the weeds all the time, but this is what you're looking at here. So over to the left, what you're looking at is in this slide is going to be strategic values or alignment that's going to be connected, as you know, to your strategic plan. Financial value and return, that's your return on investment. A lot of that information comes through your business case. The risk associated with the project, this is going to be some of the research that has initially been done on the project. And of course, you'll have a risk plan when you do your planning component. And then overall benefits and value. So I want you to see this graphic because I thought this would really help you to be able to understand that strategic, financial, risk, and all overall benefits and value feed into why any of our companies and organizations do a project in the first place. Now, there's other factors, internal and internal to the organization, and so internal or external. But the point is that you have so many drivers of why you're doing a project. Now, those of you who are on here, I saw several of you are from government agencies. In many cases, what's happening in your case is you might have a regulatory thing that's happening that you're having to make changes for some reason. Now, the point in saying all of that is we need to understand what's driving that project because that's going to make a difference on how high a priority it really is. Then all of a sudden you'll notice that the value is brought by the project, and then that priority of the project will be ranked. And many times, just like what many of you have said in class, in a live class, is those priorities change, and that creates such a challenge for all of us when those priorities change. And of course, resource availability. So most of you are on very limited resources of people, and so especially right now with unemployment going up, I saw that this past week 900,000 more people signed up for unemployment, and so that's letting us see the prelude of moving into the recession time. So we're hoping that the economy rebounds pretty quick and we don't continue down that direction. But all the indicators right now, as you already know, is that we're moving into a recession, which could impact us for the next 2 to 5 years. And so I know that's not what we're wanting. And then the last piece is the project got approved. And the reason the project was approved is it's driving those strategic those strategic values and those strategic benefits. And so I think this kind of helps you be able to look at that. Now, here's some benefits of project prioritization. Improved efficiencies, strategic alignment, like we just talked about, consistent return on investment, lean process improvement, transparency, fast delivery, and increased project success. So these are some of the benefits that we consistently are looking at over and over again. And this still does not take into account regulatory that many of you deal with on a daily basis within your organization and your projects. But you are looking at a project to try to make things better, run faster. You're trying to make as much money as we can from that project. That's why you're doing it, because it's going to give you value from return on investment. It could be speeding up the process, or it could just be allowing people to be able to know more. But the point is, there's a lot of different benefits from the prioritization of this. Now, what it is like to not prioritize a project. Now, many of you have probably at some point in time worked on a project that was that maybe was our group of projects that maybe were not prioritized. And so here's what we get into when a project or a group of projects are not prioritized. First off, if you don't have a project management office, and I think we'll be talking about the PMOs next month, but when you don't have a project management office, one of the challenges you get into is that I think this is a high project, you don't think it's very high. So people are accepted by the flavor of the month club. And if you know what I'm talking about, there's a little bit of a smile, but there's a whole lot of headache that comes with that. So every project that pops up, everybody thinks it's the number one project, and so that becomes the number one flavor of the month. And so we work on it, and then all of a sudden, okay, here's another number one project coming in at the end of that month. So that one drops down, and now we're working on this. So you're not really delivering a project out the door, but you've got a lot of stuff in the pipeline that you're working on. There's also low priority projects are given high priority for completion, and that's kind of frustrating, especially because we don't know what the ranking order is. So we have a tendency to do what we like. Our projects are placed on hold while dealing with daily crisis. Oh my goodness. So many of you deserve a crown in heaven for some of the crisis that you guys do on a day-to-day basis. Men and women are brought into projects at the drop of a hat in a moment's notice to put out the fires of some of these projects. And not that that's not going to happen to all of us, it does. But the challenge that we get into, look and see if you agree with this, the challenge that we seem to get into, does it ever seem to you like we're going from crisis to crisis to crisis? So you're a project manager? Yes, I am. I have to have medication because we run crisis to crisis all the time. So we get caught into those kind of things. And then people are frustrated but think this is the normal culture. In other words, putting out fires every day is the normal culture. And don't mistake what I'm saying. I'm not saying that you're not going to have problems. I'm not saying that there's not going to be those times that we all get pulled in because of a crisis that we need to work together on. All those are going to happen. But that should be the exception rather than the rule. We should not be living our life from crisis to crisis. And so people are frustrated but think this is normal. And then individuals talk about changing things, but have you ever noticed that it seems like nothing changes? You can have meetings, you can have training, everybody talks about it, we all gripe about it, everybody agrees, but nothing changes. It still continues. That's some of the ripple effect of not prioritizing projects. Now, I'm not saying that project priorities can't change. Sure, they can. You get new leadership, your projects are going to change. You get to have certain events happen in your industry, your projects are going to change. So we do have to look at all of those. The other thing that we want to look at is focus on project prioritization. Now, if you're a PMO, you're already trying to do this, but it is a challenge because you have competing priorities. So project prioritization focuses on aligning projects to strategy. It makes a difference in which order to complete a project. It focuses on the drivers of the organization and what benefits mean the most. Now, by this, it means that we've got our strategic plan here and we're taking projects from that strategic plan to drive those particular goals. We've decided this is what it takes for us to be the most profitable and to deliver the greatest return on investment, net present value, internal rate of return, and all those kind of things. And that's the reason why I listed those on that last bullet point was project prioritization considers all of that in that business case, and that's why that project is being driven in the first place. So why project prioritization? What's the big deal? Well, here's something I thought was interesting. 57% of projects are more likely to succeed if they're prioritized. Why? Your people are working on the most important thing at all times. That's why. Outdated projects can be removed because they're not aligned with the organizational strategy. 10 to 40% of the projects are not aligned to the organization's project strategic plan or goals. And we've all been in those situations. And so this isn't a gripe. This is just stating it the way that we have all experienced. We've all been on that project that we all think should have been killed off last year or the year before or the year before that, and yet people are still putting money into that. Or we've all been on that project that you know is not a high priority project, but somebody's driving that project because it's high priority for them, but not really the organization. So to be able to come together with some kind of mechanism to prioritize the projects for the organization is going to automatically increase the potential of success for those projects. Why project prioritization? It reduces running from crisis to crisis. We are burning out our project managers, we're burning out our teams because most of us have a skeleton crew. Now, maybe your organization's different, but most of us are working with open positions in the organization because we haven't allowed anybody to fulfill those positions. And so what's happening is that you've got that skeleton crew that's trying to work on that big barrage of projects. And so we kind of run from crisis to crisis, and resources have a tendency to jump from one project to the next. But it's the idea of putting out fires, not just doing work, but putting out the fires over and over again. And it just consumes us over a while. And that's one of the reasons why we have people who are very cynical sometimes, is because it seems like nothing changes. What you know is that if I'm working on a project, it's a headache, and we're going to put out fires all day, and people aren't going to be happy. And those are the pieces that will cause many people to think, man, I don't want to work on these projects anymore, and I don't want to work with that team anymore. You probably have some wonderful people working at that organization, and you probably have wonderful team members that are working on that project. But we get beat up enough because of crisis to crisis, and we all have a tendency to look at the negative. All right, so why do people not prioritize the projects then? If project management prioritization is going to automatically increase the potential of being able to, for that project to be completed and successful, you'd think that everybody would prioritize the project. Well, here's some of the main things. Number one, people are fearful that they will miss a new opportunity for profitability. So what happens is, because we're over here looking at something else that might make us some more money to reposition our organization, and so we want to be open for those projects. And I even understand that, because you want new products, you want new profitability. But the thing is that you still got to keep the main thing until those new opportunities come along. Not that you're not going to take on some of these new opportunities as new projects. The second thing would be no confidence in team members' ability to do a good job on the prioritization and projects. Team members are going to elevate themselves to the level that's needed. And many team members can do an awesome job, but you have to look at the foundation. Did we put any training into those people? Do they know, and do they have the skills to be able to provide this level of work that we're wanting them to provide? Sometimes we'll give a team member something, we expect them to do something, but we've not provided the training, and we've not done anything to support that person. Third is going to be limited information or data to make a decision. We see this in projects all the time. You probably do too, especially in traditional projects where management's kind of controlling things from a top-down perspective. And so what happens is management's wanting to control it, so they make most of the decisions, and they communicate with very little information to the project team. That's what we're talking about here. So if you're wanting your project to be able to pick up the pace, limited information or data to make the decision has to be pushed down closer to the team. Load the workers up with as much work as possible to guarantee they continue to work. This is that old mindset that people are not going to do a good job. It's the old mindset that actually comes from a theory X kind of mindset in management theory, and that is that people are basically lazy, and so I'm going to really load them up so that they won't be lazy on my shift. Well, the truth is, people will work, and you've got some good workers, and many of your people will be very supportive, but they want to know what's going on. And then last here would be lack of time to do this level of analysis and prioritization. We're so pressed to get stuff going that we don't feel like we've got time to plan. We don't do a lot of planning anyway, it seems like, and we don't have the time to do the analysis in order to determine this project should go before this project. Now, as we look at all of these different pieces, one of the things that we have to come up with is we've got to be able, if we're using traditional project management, to allow people to plan and analyze what's going on. If we're in management or at a PMO, we've got to be able to do the analysis for prioritization with those projects. Your people will do a wonderful job, but they've got to know what the pecking order is of the project. And if something has to be changed out of order, fine, but your people need to be working on the most important things at all times. Now, here's some bad ways to prioritize projects, okay? The first one is designate money to departments and allow everyone to prioritize their own. Now, I can see a strength in this in that you've decentralized the prioritization process. And if these people are only working on that project, that might be okay. But if you're using one pot of resources of people and you've got every department prioritizing their number one project, then you're going to have 10 to 15 different number one projects and you're pulling from the same resource pool. So that's going to make a difference. So if everybody is working on their own projects and the resource pool is decentralized, meaning that only the IT people are working on the IT project and only the operational people are working on operations and maintenance projects, you could get by with that. But if you're pulling from the same pool of people, this is going to create problems. The other thing is upper management decides which projects are most important to work on currently. Upper management is connected to the strategic plan. They're connected to the return on investment, and many organizations, upper management would do a good job with that. However, understand that sometimes what happens is that the team member feedback would help upper management in deciding what their proper pecking order should be. Select projects which are the cheapest to deliver. You'll see organizations do this. The lowest amount of money projects go first, and then those that are going to cost the most, they hold off on those because there's so much money committed to them. Well, that means that you could have a project that should be ranked as number 10 being number one because it happens to be a lower budget. And that's not one of your better ways of doing this. Pick projects that are recommended by someone in a presentation. Listen, people can be very influential in a presentation and they can do their PowerPoint slide and they can talk it up and all of those type of things. But here's the bottom line. What value does it bring to the organization? That's the simplest question it can be. What value does it bring? If it's money, and not everybody's going to measure it based on return on investment. So if I invest $1 million, am I getting 10 million out of it? That's going to be return on investment. Or if in value, if we invest in this project, what value is it going to bring? Does it mean that I don't have to have 20 people working someplace because when we finish, we've got machines that are going to do that part and I can use those 10 or 20 people someplace else? See, that's the point. We've got to interpret it for our culture, our organization. Now, one of the pieces that feeds into this is this portfolio view. And so let me get close enough here so I can see this with you. So you'll notice you'll start over here. Some people will look at it from a strategic development. They should. And from that strategic development, you'll notice that you have some pre-screening issues. You've got screening and then optimal portfolio selection. Now, portfolio is going to be connected up at the top close to the strategic plan. And some organizations will actually use a portfolio of project proposals to drive pieces of that strategy. So what happens is rather than management just deciding it, they allow people to give project proposals that they think is going to align with those strategic goals and objectives and are going to drive that. And there's nothing wrong with this. This particular author did a good job, I thought, breaking this down. And so that's the reason why we included this. And this is also connected to the quality association, which I liked as well. So it starts over here to the left and it says project proposals. And so you got some pre-screening. And so that pre-screening is going to go in the direction of how does this connect to the strategy? Now, strategy development that we're talking about could be a lot of different things, but it's basically your strategic plan, your strategic goals, and how you're going to achieve any of those objectives. Then notice that from pre-screening, it goes over to individual project analysis. And then of course, you've got a little bit of information there. Then it goes from there to actual screening. Then it goes to optimal portfolio selection. So this is the portfolio. This is the pot we're going to put our money in. And then it goes to portfolio adjustment. And then now you're starting to move into project development, phase gate evaluation, and successful completion. Now, with all of these pieces, what it's really showing you in traditional project management is what we already know. It starts strategic, goes to portfolio, because that's your pot of money. Then it goes down to program, and then it goes down to multiple projects to drive it. So if we're looking at it through a logical sequence, our projects would feed into the program into the portfolio that we're looking right here, and the portfolio is driving those strategic plans. And that's how it should be lined all the way through. Now, in portfolio planning, it balances between delivery and capacity. Not every organization can run endless projects, and so portfolios drive the strategic plans and goals and seeks to fund those initiatives. Portfolios align the program and projects to specific goals and outcomes. And the challenge that you get into with portfolio management, as many of you already know, is the lack of portfolio management makes the driving of strategic goals less pronounced and prevents others from aligning their actions to one precise objective. So because we're not doing real good on the portfolio, it's going to cause our programs to struggle, which is going to cause our projects to struggle. And we might be finishing projects on time and on budget, but the challenge is you don't really see that lineage all the way up to the top of driving that strategic plan. There's a disconnect as you move up. Now, I thought this was an excellent graphic as well. And so you've got your strategy, your ideas, and this one, the thing I like about it is they put regulations in there. And some of you, all of your projects are based on regulations. You're constantly having to realign to regulations. And then that feeds into whether it's a strategy, a new idea for a project, or regulations, because we've got all of those on our plate. They feed into the portfolio. And then, of course, the portfolio feeds ultimately into coordinated projects. And I think this is very realistic with what we're doing, because you do have strategy, you do have new projects you want to do, and you do have regulatory things that create a project that you're just trying to comply with. Now, balancing project delivery with capacity to deliver. What is the delivery capacity for projects in the organization? If team members are counted at 6 hours each day, how many project hours are people able to complete? And what is driving the high volume of projects in the pipeline? So this middle bullet point where we talk about how many hours you count or count for a person in your project on your project is really all over the place. Many times if somebody is dedicated 100% of the time, I've seen project managers count them as 40 hours on that project. Many times in government, you'll see people counted as 40 hours on a project. And government is one of the ones doesn't make a lot of sense to me, because you've got people who are doing their real job and then they're doing the projects they've been assigned to. And so most people are not going to work 40 hours on that project in most cases. So you're having to back it off 6 hours or 6.5 hours, whatever the case may be able to allow them to do some of their other stuff or some of their administrative stuff and work on that project. So to show you that alignment one more time from strategic to project, this is what we're talking about. We've got strategic plan, portfolio, program, and then you've got all your multiple projects that are driving, that are being completed to drive that work and that completion underneath the program. So you're trying to shift from performance to cause and effect. So we have to look at that. So many things that we do is cause and effect. We do something over here and has this effect. If you would look at projects as cause and effect, it would benefit us sometimes. We drive a project so that it will affect the program goals that affect the portfolio goals that affect the strategic plan. But sometimes we lose that connection. So prioritizing projects gives power to organizational direction. It shifts the organization from measuring standard performance, which is successful and unsuccessful organizations do, to driving success. It has that cause and effect. It pushes the organization to create certain projects as drivers and then measures the effect of those drivers. And then cause and effect allows the organization to be behavioral and outcome driven. And so that's really what you were wanting to go to. We work like crazy. We work a lot of hours, but what kind of benefits or what kind of outputs are we really getting? So what behaviors do we have and what outcomes are we really reaching in all of that working? So here's some examples of the cause and effect shift. For an example, organizations change their customer base and they find a stronger, more responsive customer as they start doing this. For an example, you saw this actually in Amazon in the early years. When Amazon was created, their initial offering to people was basically books, and then you started seeing them add other products. Now Amazon still offers books, but now they offer everything. And so their customer base for books was far different than their customer base is today. The PMO trains everyone in project management and projects to become more consistently successful. So that's a cause and effect. We're training everyone over here so that they produce that job over here. And you're seeing that right now with Scrum and Agile. organizations that are wanting to do more hybrid or more agile and scrum, they're starting to train their people in this. Why? Because they've run traditional for so long, and now they're wanting to look at it differently. And then team members receive authority to make decisions, and morale is stronger with more team identity. You see a cause and effect there. We push the decision making down to the team, and now what has gone up? Their morale has gone up, and they feel like they are able to make more decisions, and that's better for them. And then the last piece here was the organizational priorities are communicated to the team, which increases the success of stronger project decisions. And so once again, opening up communication helps that frontline team member. So here are some of the goals. The goals are a boundary for project selection. And so as we look at all these goals, this is what we're doing. The very center point of what we do day after day is projects. And sometimes we forget about everything else, but understand there is a huge connection in this family of work that we're doing. The projects to the programs, to the project prioritization, to goals, to strategic plan, all of that has to come together in order for us to hit that bullseye correctly. And there's also 5 dimensions of project prioritization. And we've looked at it from the aspect of strategic and financial risk, regulatory safety. And that's the reason why so many of our projects have a tendency to have these same dimensions. And the reason is because once again, you're trying to comply. Many of you are doing safety projects or quality projects. Many of you are doing projects that reduce the risk and for your organization or regulatory or financial. So with strategic, it's on the strategic plan, strategic objectives, strategic outcomes. For financial, it focuses on bringing the most value, return on investment, and profit. And it can also include positioning or repositioning. For an example, if we are in the recession, like we're being told that is happening by our economists, so if your gross domestic product drops two terms in a row, you're supposed to be heading into the early stages of a recession. So if we are, you're going to see companies reposition several things in order to ride the recession out and to be able to come back. Now we know that the recession has not, it hasn't helped with the COVID, because COVID has been something that has just been devastated a lot of businesses too. So hopefully this is going to be shorter term as we get the shots, as the infection gets under control, and as stimulus packages go out and all those type of things. Hopefully the recession will not be 5 to 7 years. It'll only be hopefully a year or two. But my point is, companies and organizations will reposition. Do you realize this? You will actually reposition possibly during this time. What you've done for years, if you lose your job, you might look at repositioning how or what you do in order to gain additional employment. And that's part of that repositioning. Under risk, focuses on reducing or avoiding risk, which could hurt the organization or its goals. And so you change your projects could be to reduce the risk of something happening. You see many of your power plants have work done every year. And of course, what is that? Those are maintenance projects to make sure that those dams and those type of structures are going to be able to hold in case there's some type of earthquake or some type of flooding or whatever the case may be. And so those are risk reduction type of projects. And then some of you have regulatory, like we referred to earlier, focuses on compliance, implementing projects to remain compliant with standards or governance structures of a governing body. And then the last one is safety, focuses on increasing safety or preventing hazards which could harm others. And so we have those type of projects. Many people had short-term projects just trying to deal with the virus. Think about it, your church or your synagogue or where you worship. I mean, think about they've had to put a process in to be able to disinfect the church and to be able to have new standards. Of course, the health department has helped with all of that with the guidelines, but the point is that every local business and church, synagogues, every kind of organization has had to look at how can we be safe to keep people coming in to attend church or to buy from our store. So we've had to do those safety projects. And the thing is that we're still struggling with that right now as people are trying to get over this disease. So the focus of project alignment, portfolio, program, project, that's what you're looking at. How does this fit that overarching goal? So that means that even if management did not give you a prioritization of the project, if you're working on a project that's driving one of the strategic goals of that organization, you probably are working on what would be classified as a high priority project. Now, the other thing that we get into a lot of times is what's called an urgency projects due to crisis, due to a lot of different things. So with this graphic, you'll notice that I've given you some quadrants here. And so we've got under urgency, I've got early to late projects under urgency, and then I've got low to high under impact. So as I do this, you'll notice that there's right in the middle is nice to do. These are those projects that feel good, they're nice to do, but the challenge is that they don't necessarily fit into the number one priority. And then when you've got something that's going to be high impact, then it's under that must do. These are high impact projects. They're going to align with a strategic plan, and they're going to have a high urgency with it. Now you'll notice over here in the right hand corner at the bottom won't do. These are going to be low impact, lower, late urgency. So the urgency is going to be extremely low from things. And so what you're looking at here is these are projects that if we have extra money, we have extra people, we might do some of those, but probably not. And so those are going to be out of that quadrant. So everything in that first yellow line that you see, the under must do, those are the projects that you're trying desperately to get done. So those would be your high priority projects. Everything right there in the middle, those two and a half projects right in the middle, those would be good to do if we have extra time. And then these that would be looking at on the outside, those would be, we won't do those because they're too far beyond what the original goals would be. Now, projects drive improvement. The project should be clearly connected to business goals and reflect both strategic objectives and priorities of the current operating plan. The problem is recognized to be of major importance to the business, both in terms of its quality and financial impact. So when we look at projects are creating change. And that's one of the reasons why you have conflict, but it also drives improvement. How can we be better? How can our organization be more streamlined? I mean, think about it. Who would ever have thought that so many organizations would come up with some kind of mechanism to be able to get us groceries without going into a store, to get our prescriptions without going into a store. They had to create new processes to be able to come up with how you could drive by and they could give you these articles or these purchases. And so they've done that on purpose because of what's happening in the culture with everything. Also, with projects drive improvements, a project scope should not be too large. Completion within 6 months is a desirable objective. That's not always true. I know many of you are working on projects that take 2 or 3 years, but the thing that you're looking at in project management is always going to be that needs to be temporary. It's considered to be short term. It's not considered to be something that is like operations. But many of you work on projects that are far longer than 6 months for sure. There should be quantitative measures of success that can be evaluated both before and after the project's completed, and the project should have management support. Now we know management support is very important, but the piece that we leave out so many times is metrics. We should be using these metrics to be able to know what's happening in our project and are we doing good or are we not. So one of the things that people will use is what's called a priority matrix. And so the priority matrix will take a lot of different things. So here's what we've done here. You'll see the criteria across the top. So the strategic plan is going to be a criteria of 1 to 5. The return on investment would be a 1 to 5, and then risk would be a 1 to 5. And so what you're trying to do is you're trying to pull your scores together here. So in this particular case, return on investment for the strategic plan was a 5. So was the middle one, 10 plus. So it's going to be 10% or better. And risk was a 3. So that gave us a score of 4.3. Positioning. So this particular project under positioning was going to give us a 3 in strategic plan. So it didn't really position us, but right in the middle. Gave us a 2 on return on investment right then and 2 on risk. And so it gave us a 2.3. So it might help us on positioning, but you'll see that the average score was going to be a little less. And then expertise, the same thing. But a priority matrix allows you to numerically come up with, you and your team and our management and the team come up with these numbers that's going to help in prioritizing these projects. Another way of doing this that you'll see a lot of times is doing something similar to this, but using a color code for some of these. And so what you're looking at here is project A through E, the strategic goals, the work effort, the financial value, and the cost, and allows you to be able to rank these. And so as you do that, you'll see that D actually had a higher rating of everything when you're looking at this, because you had 4 for strategic goal, 4 for work effort, a 3 for financial value, a 4 for cost, and a 4 for resource impact. So overall, overall rating was better. But that doesn't take away that some of those 5 for strategic goals might still trump it because they were such a big deal. And so every organization has to interpret it differently. Another one that I wanted you to see, this gave you a priority 1, 2, and 3. And this is a realistic way of doing this for projects for your people. And so you got your project name, the anticipated completion date, who's the owner or the project manager, what particular group, what milestone they're on. And then of course you're using the RAG system of red, amber, green to know what the status is of each of those projects. Now this is based on status of the project rather than status of an activity. Many of you do this on a schedule, activity, or Gantt chart. Nothing wrong with that, but this allows as a higher kind of matrix that allows people to be able to know what's happening on that project. And then this was a priority matrix focused on the project as well. High priority, next priority, last priority, and so forth. Anticipated completion date. It gave you a status with the same RAG system, and then gave you comments. So I'm showing you all of these just to kind of get you thinking that the priority system can be created. You're going to create your own metrics. You don't have to take what anybody else has used. Use something that you and your team come up with to be able to prioritize those. You'll also see a project priority when you're looking at a couple of different projects, when you're looking at it from the aspect of project value and then overall priority. And so as you look at these, for blue, that was your financial value, and then the orange was the overall value. And so you have project A and F, which have huge financial value. One of the positive things about that is you'll notice also that they actually have a very high amount of overall value that would actually help you. But you've got some of these, like for an example, you've got number 3, item number 3 there. I don't have my glasses on. I'm sorry. I apologize. Okay, yeah, item number 3, you'll notice financial value is low, but you see the overall value is still very high. And so that might be something that's talked about on when to do that project, because the overall value of that is going to be extremely high. So once again, your culture, your environment pleads into that. All right, so we pointed those out to you, and then we pointed that out to you as well. All right, let's go a little further here. Another priority matrix many people will use a percentage, and they'll do it based on a pie shape, and you might do this as well. So this is looking at 4 different projects, or 5 different projects, I'm sorry, all from financial value. And so what's happened is you've come back with a percentage of what you think the financial value would be. So the number 1 financial value is 28%, and so you'll see that in the blue. And so they've ranked these based on financial value. 28%, all the way down to 11%. So if finance was the number 1 thing that was running this, then the 11% would probably be a lower priority, because you would want those 28% financial projects to really be able to go go full steam, because you're wanting to be able to get that return on investment. And then priority matrix, this was Don Wessel's priority matrix that I thought was interesting, and so I want to give him credit for this. But you have project selection process here, 1 to 10. Notice under customer satisfaction, business results, employee satisfaction, increased revenue, reduced costs and longevity, size of investment, a project complexity or risk. And so you have all of those, and then you're looking at the weight, the rate, and the weighted rating, which is W times R. And so what you're doing is multiplying those 2 together. And so this is an excellent tool, just to show you another tool that somebody else uses in being able to come up with what's the right priority. And this takes away from you and I just sitting there throwing out ideas of how to prioritize it. So in a priority matrix for a construction company, you'll notice over here that you've prioritized the projects, and you've prioritized it based on management, the public, or the company board of directors. And so then from that, it feeds into the breakdown of all the projects that are going to come underneath it. Those that are going to be operational, those that are management, financial, technical, legal, and environmental. And so those projects are feeding down from that aspect. So there's a lot of different ways to look at that priority. But the point is that whatever way you're looking at it, you want to have some type of numerical score to be able to come up with this. So the other piece that is going to be a rating based on quality. So this is a sample rating scale that's put out by the Quality Association that I thought was really good. And so you're looking at the rating, and then you're looking at the definition and the weight. And so something that's extremely difficult, you'll see it's a 0%. And of course, as it goes up, then it gets lighter, it gets easier, and gives you a higher percent or higher weight in being able to look at it through the eyes of quality. So I just wanted to show you and expose you to that piece there. Okay, so let's pull this together in these last dozen slides or so, okay? All right, so the team approach to project selection. If we're using a team to give input, and that's a great way to do this, the PMO can be the structure that prioritizes the project. And many PMOs do this. Management can be the group. Some organizations select a team to compare the strategic plan and vision to the project selection process. And so the selected team must understand both the strategic position of the organization and the project knowledge. And the team must have a balance of know-how and authority to make the decision. So a lot of people are going to have their bias. You know, a lot of times we think we're not biased, but of course we are. There's certain projects we think are really the driver, and there's some that we don't want to even work on. But the point is that in trying to come up with the pecking order of these projects, that's the reason why the negotiation and the interaction back and forth with people is going to be so important. The team leader provides the project proposals to the team for review. If you're using a team approach, the team discusses what criteria they'll use for these proposals, and the criteria is based on how much value the project brings to the customer, urgency of the of the project, excuse me, what happens if the project proposal is not selected for completion, and if the organization has expertise to complete and manage the project. So you'll notice that what I like about the team selection approach is that they're talking about the value to the customer. They're also talking about, okay, what is the plan if we're not granting this as one of the projects we're working on. And then the third piece is going to, that last piece there, the organization, does the organization have the expertise to do this? And that last one's going to make a difference on whether you're doing it internal or whether you're actually going to vendor this out. Also, with the selection process, you must have flexibility to use different types and sizes of projects. It keeps real information and data before the team, not speculatory, and it provides a strong quantitative selection, which is easy to justify based on the analysis. So you'll notice almost everything continues to go back to coming up with some type of quantitative way of scoring it. And if we're doing it from a quantitative way, we're reducing the potential of bias that we have. So let's take a look at the scoring system. So you can do a 1 to 10 scoring system, a 1 to 5, 1 to 3, whatever's going to fit your culture. But a scoring system allows the scoring team to determine project priority on a quantitative scoring scale. So the scoring can be very sophisticated or something as simple as a 1 to 5 scale. So the benefits then of benchmarking some of these to understand how we're measuring this is we're going to have increased individual quality, establishes worker buy-in, it adjusts internal goals and standards, and it lays a foundation for others' ideas and increases the level of overall performance. And so we want to be able to understand what is considered to be a good project and good return on investment, what that baseline is and what is not. For an example, on return on investment, many organizations have pre-selected 10%. If I'm going to invest $1 million here, I want at least 10% return on investment from this project. And if that project is not bringing in 10%, then that's going to rank lower than some of the others. What to benchmark? Well, focus on main indicators or priority areas. Focus on lagging indicators. Understand that not all areas can be the best, and seek out correct and trustworthy benchmarks and establish corrective actions for each. As we benchmark some of these things, no project is perfect and no team is perfect, no project manager is perfect. So we're constantly taking all of these and we're having to look at the totality of this thing. Same thing when you're trying to do this. This project looks like it should be number one based on these scores, but those scores could be deficient in some way. Or, as we all know, there's something you don't know about that project that's going to happen. And so we can plan all we want, but there's going to be something that surfaces that we didn't anticipate. Now let's flip this for a second and prioritize some of these projects with agile strategies. Because Agile is driving so much of the business today, Agile and Scrum and these hybrid type of projects, people are having to look at, okay, how do we rank an agile project compared to traditional? And so really it's just the methodology we're going to use to run that project. So agiles can use 100 points to prioritize the project if they'd like. Each project can receive up to 100 total points, but any points used on one project reduces the total from 100. So an example of this would be a project at 25 points means that the remaining projects will share the remaining 75 points. So let's say I've got 10 projects here, but I've only got 100 points to be able to use. And any point I use on any of the previous projects reduces my pot of 100. And so that means that I'm being very stingy with where I'm going to put my points if all I've got is 100 and I've got 10 projects out here I'm looking at. And that's just kind of gets you in that mindset of, I'm not just saying this is the ranking order, I'm willing to contribute some of my points toward that. The other side would be customers can prioritize projects based on which ones deliver the highest desired product, service, or feature. Product owners function as the guardian of the features and consistently rank them from highest to lowest priority at the project level. And so it could come back to which one is going to give us greatest value, not on cost or speed, but on features. In other words, we get additional features here. And that might make all the difference in the world on how you rank this because you're wanting the most features. We also need to compare that capacity to allocation. And you see this a lot of times when you're trying to work your projects. Right now, many organizations are running with a low capacity. And so we have unused capacity and we have unmet demand, and then you have allocated resources. That little spot right there in the center that says allocated resources, that's us. And so as you know, most of you want more resources, more people, but we're it. And so you have unused capacity, and we might have a lot of capacity, but we also have unmet demand because we only have that small, limited allocated resources. So capacity focuses on the maximum level of effort or projects an organization can deliver within the constraints of number of people. And this first bullet point is so important to us because this is something we have to look at all the time. You might have 35 projects, but you only have enough people for 20 of those projects. And a lot of times people have never done a capacity analysis for their organization to anticipate how many more resources they need for this. So that's why you've got to prioritize what projects are the most important so that you use your resources effectively. Allocation focuses on the level of assignments or projects given to the number of people. Now, this is not a popular slide, so please don't stone me over this, but I think there are times when you have to say no to a project. And if you're doing prioritization, you have to say no to some. You don't have unlimited resources in the area of people. You don't have unlimited resources in the area of money. So that means that just because a project comes down the pipeline does not mean we have to do it. So organizational cultures should set some projects, and some project managers, I think they set them up for failure by running too many projects simultaneously. Those of you who've heard me live, you know what I'm talking about. I talk about this all the time. We've got so much stuff in the pipeline that a project manager is so thin, spread so thin, they're attending all these crazy meetings that for projects that are not even really being worked on yet. They're way up in the pipeline. And so I think I'm convinced of that. The more I see of this, you've got wonderful project managers and wonderful teams, and we can't get stuff out the door. But once again, our process or our culture has set some of these folks up for failure. Sometimes not placing enough resources on the project. We gave 3 people to the project, and really there should have been 5, but we're trying to work those 3 as if they're going to produce the level of 5. Removing resources for other initiatives and priorities. My goodness, you see that all the time, don't you? You get pulled off for something and you think, well, it was only for a day, but that was still a day you didn't work on that project. Limiting communication on the strategic focus. We don't know what's happening. Management's not saying anything, and management's good too, but sometimes that they have that disconnect to keep up the communication. And then assigning a delayed project, but no one can adjust the due date. So the project was, a due date was given of June 15th, but the project started 90 days late. But of course, we're not going to change that due date. I'm sure that never happens to anybody that's on this call. But the point is, we see this happen all the time. And so that's kind of set people up for failure in those situations. The other piece of this is, how do you handle that ad hoc or work request? Now, by ad hoc and work requests, I'm talking about something that's not really a project. It's that little piece of work that you're having to do, but it's not like a full-blown project at all. So every organization must compete in a changing environment and be ready to adjust. So how do you respond to these kind of requests? Well, first off, some give these requests first priority and move them ahead of any scheduled project. And that might be right or wrong, but the point is, some people give that number one priority. The second piece of this is, some discuss the new project, and if the requester has funding, allows it to go forward as a high priority project. And for some of your organizations, if they have funding, it might make it be one of the measurements that you want for your metric on whether it should go first or not. Because how many projects in your culture people want, but funding doesn't come through for it. And so you've invested a lot of time and effort, but doesn't have any funding, didn't have any funding the next year or the next year. And then finally it gets funding. So funding could be one of the metrics that you're looking for. And if it is, that's fine. And then the last is, organizations who have not created a scoring system are dominated by these types of projects. So what happens is, we just have people asking for us and wanting it, but we don't have a scoring system to really put them in some type of priority. So what would help your organization? Once again, none of this is a criticism, but it is an observation of what hurts us so many times in project management. So as we discuss project prioritization, what could your organization do to better prioritize those most important projects? And then on a scale of A to F, how does your organization do with prioritizing the projects? And so those are two internal questions I think you need to ask and consider for yourself, so that you can start prioritizing some of those projects. Now, before I go into next month, let me just stop and open it up here for just a moment for questions, and then I'll go into next month and talk a little bit about what we're going to be doing next month. So let me open this up. Wow, I see a bunch of you on here. Some of you, I see old friends on here. Hello. So what questions do you have or comments about project prioritization? How does your organization do with prioritizing projects? And I've got the chat open if you'd rather chat, but how does your organization do with prioritizing projects? Comments? A lagging measurement, a lead measurement, a lagging measurement just means where do you get your measurement. If it's a lead measurement, we measure it up front and decide on the score. A lagging measurement is going to come after the event, is what it's going to be. So based on presentation, we do a lot of ad hoc work. I bet you do. I bet you do. Anybody else? How's your organization do with this? See you, Mike. Take care.
I was trying to do something else. Keith, it's easier for me to explain. We had the executive level. They create a roadmap for us, the 5 key things we're to do. And then we have different organizations within MasterCard, and they have all competing prioritizations to meet those 5 goals there. And each one has an RMO, and they have a measure upon the priority for each release.
Wow, that's really pretty sophisticated.
It has to be when you compete with so many globally. So
do the projects change? Do you change priorities quite often with the way that's structured?
Unfortunately, yes, because the team I work with is the core, so they have 4 releases a year. Most of the other teams are agile, but let's say 20% can slip out and others come in. So there's and for some reason I always wind up on my lap.
Well, you're on more medication than other people. Let's call it the way it is with us project managers.
Appreciate the help there.
We tend to assign everything as a high priority. Yes, that's everybody does that. That's right, Steve. And I saw someone say our projects are prioritized, and then the legislature comes back and the plan blows up. Yeah, because once again, more authority, and their perspective of priority is different than yours, Susie. So you're absolutely right. And so everybody's going to do that. We're going to all have those kind of situations that we have a tendency to look at. We have our perception of what should be priority. All right, let me talk real quick here about next month, so you'll be aware of what's coming down the pipeline for that we're going to look at next month. Next month, our webinar is called Marching Orders: How to Expand the Influence and Impact of an Internal PMO. And of course, I don't know if you have a PMO. If you're talking about doing a PMO can be a blessing or a curse, and the control level of a PMO can be a lot of different things. So we'll talk a little bit about the PMO next month, and so we'll get information out for you to have to get in for that particular seminar. And if you have any questions, don't hesitate to contact me. You can look at our Mathis group, themathisgroup.com, or you can just call us at the 800 number 223-3731. And so I wish you well. And so stay healthy. Hopefully by fall, we're going to be able to go back to face with everybody. And so I know you're looking for some of that as well. So you guys, thank you so much for being part of this. Thank you so much for being part of this. And as consulting contractors, prioritization is a bit unique. Yeah. Well, the reason it is because it's more on the customer side for the consultant. The consultant's coming in based on what the customer is saying. So that's what it is in that situation. Okay. Thank you guys. Have a wonderful day. Bye guys. See ya.
Thank you.